I am 91 years old, and I have refused to move in with my children 3 times now. The last time was 6 months ago. My daughter cried. She said I was being stubborn. She said she worried about me alone in this house, especially in winter. She asked me what would happen if I fell, if something went wrong, if I needed someone in the middle of the night. I told her the truth. I told her I would rather die alone in this house than spend my remaining years surrounded by people, feeling lonely. She didn't understand. Most people don't. I have lived alone for 18 years now. My husband Walter passed in 2007, and here is the part that will make some of you uncomfortable. When he died, after 45 years of marriage, after the grief and the funeral and the empty side of the bed, something else happened. Something I have never admitted out loud until now. I felt relief. Not because I didn't love him. I loved him deeply. But because for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to apologize for who I am. I didn't have to explain why I needed the morning to myself. I didn't have to feel guilty for wanting silence instead of conversation. I didn't have to pretend that constant company was something I craved. I was 73 years old when I finally stopped pretending. 73. If you love being alone, if you have spent your life feeling like there is something wrong with you because you don't need people the way others seem to, this is for you. I spent 50 years of my life believing I was broken. I want to tell you what I learned in the 18 years since, so you don't have to wait as long as I did. Let me take you back to 1956. I was 23, working at a small public library in Vermont. It was my first real job after college. The library was old, with wooden floors that creaked and windows that let in too much cold in winter. I loved it. I loved the basement most of all, where we kept the older books, the ones nobody checked out anymore. I would spend hours down there, organizing, reading, just being. The smell of that basement. Dust, old paper, and something like copper from the pipes. I can still smell it now, 68 years later. I was happiest there, completely alone. Surrounded by words written by people who were already dead. That should have told me something about myself. My mother visited once. She watched me work for an afternoon, and on the drive home, she said something I never forgot. She said, "Eleanor, you will never find a husband hiding in basements with dead authors." I laughed, but that night, I cried. Because I knew she was right about the hiding. I just didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I liked the basement. I liked the quiet. I liked being alone with the books and my thoughts. But the way she said it made me feel like I had a disease. My preference for solitude was a defect that needed fixing. So I tried to fix it. I forced myself to go to social gatherings. I joined a women's club. I said yes to every invitation, even when my whole body wanted to say no. I smiled until my face hurt. I made small talk until I felt hollow inside, and at the end of every event, I would come home exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't cure. Exhausted in my bones, exhausted in my soul. I remember one party in particular, summer of 1958, a backyard barbecue at my cousin's house. 30 people, maybe more. I stood by the potato salad for 2 hours because it was near the fence, and the fence was near the gate, and the gate was my escape route if I needed it. I didn't escape. I stayed the whole time. Smiled, nodded, laughed when others laughed. When I got home that night, I sat in my car in the driveway for 45 minutes. Just sat there. I couldn't go inside yet. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't inside, but also wasn't with people. My car, in the dark, in the driveway. That was the only place left. I thought something was seriously wrong with me. I met Walter at a church picnic in 1961. I was 28. He was kind, steady, and didn't talk too much. That last part mattered more than I admitted at the time. We married a year later. I thought marriage would cure me. I thought loving someone would make me want to spend more time with people. It didn't. If anything, it made the problem worse. Because now I had to hide. For 35 years, I woke up at 4 in the morning, every single day, not because I had to, because those 2 hours before Walter and the children woke up were the only hours that belonged entirely to me. I would sit in the kitchen with my tea, watching the darkness turn to gray, and I would breathe, just breathe. No one needed anything from me. No one was watching. No one expected me to perform. 35 years of stolen mornings. I never told Walter about this. I let him think I was just an early riser. I was ashamed of needing those hours. I was ashamed of the relief I felt in the silence. What kind of wife, what kind of mother needs to escape her own family every morning just to feel like herself? I carried that shame for decades. It sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow and couldn't spit out. When Walter died, I was supposed to fall apart. Everyone expected it. My children took turns staying with me for the first few months. They were worried. They kept asking if I was okay, if I needed company, if I wanted them to move in. What I wanted was for them to leave. I didn't say that, of course. I smiled, thanked them, and let them fill my house with their presence and concern. But inside, I was counting the days until I could be alone again. Counting. When my son finally went back to his life in California, when my daughter stopped calling every single day, when the casseroles stopped arriving and the visitors stopped coming, I sat in my kitchen at 4 in the morning, and I cried. But they weren't tears of grief. No, there were tears of recognition. I was 73 years old, and I was finally meeting myself. The woman I had been hiding for half a century. She was still there, waiting, patient, unsurprised. In the 18 years since, I have learned things about people like me, people who love solitude, people who recharge in silence, people who feel most alive when they are alone. And what I have learned is this: we are not broken. We are not missing something. We have strengths the world doesn't recognize, because it's too busy celebrating the opposite. Let me tell you about the first thing I discovered. When you spend time alone, really alone, without distractions or noise or the constant input of other people, you start to hear yourself. Not the version of yourself that performs for others. Not the version that says what people want to hear. The real one. The quiet one underneath all the adaptation. I have kept a journal since I was 19. 72 years of notebooks, stacked in boxes in my spare room. 43 notebooks. I counted them last winter. For most of my life, I wrote about what happened. The children's first steps, Walter's promotions, family vacations, surface things, safe things. But after Walter died, my journals changed. I started writing about what I actually thought, what I actually felt, questions I had never asked out loud, doubts I had buried for decades, memories I had never examined. There was an entry from 2009, 2 years after Walter passed. I wrote, "I think I have been performing my entire life. I don't know who I am when no one is watching. I'm not sure I ever knew." Reading that now, it breaks something in me, because I was 75 years old when I wrote that. 75, and I was just beginning to ask who I was. In those pages, I found a woman I barely knew, a woman with opinions and preferences and dreams that had nothing to do with being a wife or a mother or a good member of society. A woman who had been waiting, patiently, silently, for 73 years to be acknowledged. That is what solitude gives you. Not loneliness, not isolation, access to yourself. The second thing I learned came from a leaky roof. In 2014, I was 79 years old. A winter storm damaged some shingles on the back of my house. Water was dripping into the spare room, the one with all my journals. My son wanted to hire someone. My daughter wanted me to move. I bought a ladder. It took me 3 days. I watched videos on my computer. I made a list of tools I would need and borrowed most of them from my neighbor, a man named Paul, who looked at me like I had lost my mind. I made mistakes, bent a nail, dropped a shingle, climbed down and climbed back up more times than I could count. My knees hurt for a week afterward. But when I finally finished, when I stood in my backyard looking up at those new shingles, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt capable. Not because fixing a roof is impressive. It isn't, but because I had done it alone. I had not asked for permission. I had not waited for someone to help me. I had identified a problem and solved it with my own hands, on my own time, in my own way. People who spend time alone develop this, a kind of independence that isn't about refusing help. It's about knowing, deep in your bones, that you can rely on yourself, that you are not waiting to be rescued, that you are your own first responder. My daughter still doesn't understand why I didn't just call someone, but she has never stood in a backyard at 79 years old, looking at something she fixed with her own hands, knowing she didn't need anyone. That feeling, I can't explain it to someone who has never felt it. There is a woman named Ruth who used to live 2 houses down from me. She moved to a nursing home last year, but for about a decade, we were what I would call parallel friends. We didn't talk much. We would wave when we saw each other. Sometimes we would sit on our respective porches, reading, occasionally looking up to acknowledge each other's presence. That was enough. More than enough, actually. It was perfect. Ruth was a painter. I didn't know this until one afternoon when I walked past her window and saw her at an easel. She was working on something blue. Water, maybe, or sky. I stood there for a moment, watching her hand move, and she never even noticed me. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere inside the painting. I understood that look. I recognized that absorption, the way the world disappears when you are alone with something you are creating. People who love being alone often create things, not because they are trying to leave something behind, not because they want recognition, but because solitude gives you access to a kind of focus that other people interrupt, ideas that need silence to form, projects that require unbroken stretches of attention. I write letters, real letters, with stamps, to people I have never met. I sometimes find addresses in magazines or in the acknowledgement sections of books. I write to authors whose work moved me. I write to strangers whose stories appeared in newspapers. I write to people who seem like they might need to know that someone, somewhere, noticed them. I have written over 1,000 letters in the past 18 years, maybe 1,200. I stopped counting after a while. I rarely get responses. That isn't the point. The point is the writing. I sit alone at my desk, thinking about another person, finding words that might matter to them. It is a form of connection that doesn't require my presence, a gift that doesn't demand anything in return. People think solitude means you don't care about others. They think being alone means being self-absorbed. But the opposite is true. When you are comfortable in your own company, you can think more clearly about other people. You can care about them without needing them to fill your emptiness. You can love without grasping. I talk to myself, out loud sometimes, when there's no one around. I used to be embarrassed about this. I used to stop mid-sentence if I heard a car in the driveway. Now I think it might be the sanest thing I do. These conversations aren't rambling or confused. They are deliberate. I ask myself questions, hard ones. I answer them honestly because there is no one to impress. I work through problems by speaking them aloud, hearing them bounce back, and examining them from different angles. The day before I decided not to move in with my daughter, I spent 3 hours in my living room, talking to myself about what I wanted the end of my life to look like. I paced, I sat, I paced again. I argued both sides out loud, like a lawyer in a courtroom where I was also the judge and the jury. I considered her offer from every angle. I thought about convenience, safety, family, and obligation. But I also thought about what would happen to the person I had finally become, the person who needed mornings alone, the person who had waited 73 years to stop apologizing. When I was done, the answer was clear. Not easy, but clear. This is what a rich inner life gives you: the ability to process without witnesses, the capacity to think deeply without interruption, the freedom to change your mind 17 times in one afternoon without anyone asking what's wrong. People who need constant company often don't know what they think until someone else reacts to it. People who love solitude know what they think because they have been sitting with their thoughts, unmediated, for years. In 2019, my son Daniel died. He was 54, heart attack, like his father. I got a call from his wife at 6 in the morning. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her, but I understood enough. A mother should not outlive her son. That's what people say, as if there are rules for these things. I flew to California. I held his children. I stood at another funeral. I did all the things you are supposed to do when your child dies before you. And then I came home, and I sat in my kitchen at 4 in the morning, and I felt something I had not expected. I felt steady. Not happy, not at peace, but not destroyed either. I had the strangest sensation of being held up by something inside me, a structure I had built over the years without realizing it, a capacity for grief that didn't require witnesses, a way of processing loss that was entirely my own. People think being alone makes you fragile. They think isolation leaves you unprepared for tragedy. But solitude builds a different kind of strength. Not the strength that comes from support systems and check-ins and shoulders to cry on. The strength that comes from sitting with your worst feelings, alone, and surviving them. Over and over, until you know, with absolute certainty, that you can survive anything. I cried for Daniel alone. I still cry for him sometimes, sitting in that kitchen in the early morning dark. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the hours when no one is awake to hear. But I have never felt like I needed someone else there to make it bearable. I have become my own witness, my own comfort, my own steady presence in the storm. I drink my tea in the morning from a blue cup that was my grandmother's. I have had this cup for 60 years. The handle is chipped. The glaze is cracked in 3 places. Every morning I hold it in my hands and feel the weight of it, the warmth of it, and I think, this is enough. Not enough in a settling for less way, enough in a complete way. This cup, this tea, this window with frost on the edges, this silence, this breath. Complete. People who spend time alone often develop this, a sensitivity to small pleasures that busy people miss. The way light moves across a wall at a certain hour, the sound of rain starts, the first page of a new book. These things become enormous when you are paying attention, when you are not rushing to the next thing, when you are not performing for anyone. I think we are taught to want more. Bigger lives, fuller schedules, more friends, more activity. But wanting more is exhausting, and it never ends. There is always more. Wanting enough is different. Wanting enough is noticing what you already have. It is sitting with a cup of tea and understanding that nothing needs to be added to this moment to make it worthwhile. My neighbor Margaret lost her husband the same year I lost Walter. But Margaret struggled in a way I didn't. She couldn't be alone. She would knock on my door 3 times a day, just to talk, just to not be by herself. At first, I resented this. I had finally gotten my solitude, and here was this woman trying to take it away. I would see her coming up the walk, and my whole body would tense. Not because I disliked her, because I needed what she was taking. But I noticed something about Margaret. She talked, but she didn't want answers. She just wanted someone to be in the room. Someone breathing, someone there. So I started doing something strange. I would let her in, make her tea, and then I would just sit with her. I wouldn't try to fill the silence. I wouldn't ask questions. I would just be present. Quiet, available, but not demanding. Margaret would talk for a while. Then she would trail off. Then she would just sit there, holding her tea, looking out the window. The first time she didn't speak for 10 minutes straight, she looked at me afterward with something like wonder, like she had discovered she could breathe underwater. Something happened over the months. Margaret stopped needing to talk so much. She started being okay with silence. She started sitting on my porch with me, reading her own book, not speaking for hours. She learned, I think, from watching me, that being alone didn't have to be terrifying. That silence wasn't emptiness. That being alone with your thoughts was a skill that could be learned, not a punishment to be endured. I didn't fix Margaret. I didn't counsel her or give her advice. I just showed her, by example, that solitude was survivable. Margaret died 3 years ago. Pneumonia. She was 84. But in her last years, she had become someone who could be alone, who could sit with herself without panic. I don't know if I taught her that or if she found it on her own. I like to think our afternoons on that porch mattered, even if I'll never know for sure. People who love being alone often develop deep empathy, not the performative kind that announces itself, the quiet kind that watches, understands, and meets people where they are. Because we have sat with our own pain, we recognize it in others. Because we don't need to fill the silence, we can hold space for grief that has no words. My daughter wants me to come to Thanksgiving this year. Extended family, 12 people in a small house, 2 days of constant interaction. I told her no. I told her I would call her on Thanksgiving morning. I would talk to each of her children. I would send gifts. But I would not spend 2 days in a house full of people just to prove that I loved them. She was upset. She asked if I was depressed. She asked if something was wrong with me. I said no. Something is finally right with me. She didn't understand. I didn't expect her to. People who love being alone learn to say no without guilt. We learn that our needs are valid, even when others don't understand them. We learn that protecting our energy is not selfish. It is necessary for survival. When I was younger, I said yes to everything, every invitation, every obligation, every request, because saying no felt like admitting there was something wrong with me, admitting that I was different, defective. Now I say no easily, without explanation, without apology, not because I don't love my daughter. I love her tremendously, but I love her better when I am not depleted. I show up better when I have been alone enough to have something to give. I call my grandchildren once a month. Not every day, not every week. Once a month. Each call lasts about 20 minutes. I know this sounds cold to some people. They imagine grandmothers should be constantly available, constantly calling, constantly involved. But here is what I have noticed. My grandchildren tell me things in those 20 minutes that they don't tell anyone else. Because I am not monitoring them. I am not checking in obsessively. I am not treating every conversation like an interrogation. I am just there, once a month, fully present, completely interested, asking questions I actually want the answers to. My grandson told me about his first heartbreak in one of those calls. He said he hadn't told his parents because they would worry. He hadn't told his friends because they would make fun of him. But he told me because I was far enough away to be safe and present enough to matter. This is what people who love solitude understand about relationships. Less can be more. Rare presence can be more meaningful than constant surveillance. When you are comfortable being alone, you don't cling to people. You don't smother them with your need. You let them breathe, and in that breathing space, they often come closer. I have friends, not many. 3 women I have known for decades. We see each other perhaps 4 times a year. We talk on the phone even less. But when we are together, we are fully together. No one is looking at their watch. No one is thinking about the next thing. We give each other our full attention because we are not scattered across dozens of superficial connections. Quality requires limits. Depth requires scarcity. The friendships that matter most are not the ones you maintain out of obligation. They are the ones you choose, deliberately, knowing that each one takes time and energy that you could be spending alone. So I choose carefully, and the choosing makes each friendship more precious. I have been talking for a while now, longer than I usually talk to anyone. If you love being alone, if you have felt your whole life like there is something wrong with you because you don't need constant company, I want you to hear this. There is nothing wrong with you. The world is loud about its preferences. The world celebrates extroversion, connection, networking, and socializing. The world tells you that being alone is a problem to be solved. The world is wrong. You have strengths that most people will never develop. You know yourself in ways that busy people never will. You can sit with discomfort that would destroy someone who has never been alone with their own mind. You can love people without needing to consume them. These are not weaknesses. These are gifts. I wasted 50 years of my life feeling ashamed of who I was. 50 years of waking up early to steal back pieces of myself. 50 years of pretending to enjoy things I hated. 50 years of apologizing, silently, constantly, for the crime of needing solitude. I cannot get those years back. But you still have yours. Whatever your age, wherever you are in your life, you have the chance I didn't have. The chance to stop apologizing now, to stop pretending now, to start building a life that actually fits who you are, instead of the life that fits who you think you should be. People will not understand. They will call you antisocial, cold, stubborn, and strange. They will worry about you. They will try to fix you. Let them. You are not required to explain yourself to people who cannot hear you. I am 91 years old. I will not live much longer. Some mornings I wake up surprised to still be here. But I am not afraid. This morning, at 4 o'clock, I sat at my kitchen table. Snow was falling outside. The house was silent. There was no one to perform for, no one to explain myself to, no one whose expectations I had to meet. Just me, the tea, the chipped blue cup, the snow. I didn't think about anything in particular. I just sat there, breathing. That was enough.